I mean, my opinion in general on these sorts of things, I think I would say in general, it's going to come down to how is it going to affect your relationship and how is it going to affect your life? Meaning, something like TV, for example. Mm-hmm. First of all, I think it could be a very big deal because if you're somebody who, who specifically does, let's say you don't want a TV in the house because you don't want your kids to be influenced by the TV because you yourself are trying to be very careful about the TV. So I would say, I think that it's very reasonable. In fact, it's responsible to make that a criteria, to make that, to say up front, listen, I don't want a TV in the house because the fact is you could be dating someone who is the exact opposite, who loves TV, who's a serial TV watcher, and would go nuts without having TV. So in my opinion, that's something that it could be a big deal. It could be, it's not such a big deal. It really depends where you're holding, what your reasoning is. And I would say as well that, for example, so again, using the example of TV. So let's say you try not to watch TV, or to, stay on the low side, the low end of watching TV. Every once in a while you do maybe.
Right. Just the Super Bowl.
Just the Super Bowl, exactly. Not like I ever, I watched the Super Bowl, but it was always for the commercials and for the food. So, but what I would say is like, if you're not, if you're somebody who sometimes does watch and you enjoy it, you don't want it in the house. You don't want it to be around your kids. You don't want your kids to have access to it. You don't want it to be something that's like a constant go-to. So then you might come up with some sort of a compromise position where it's like,
right,
you do you. I'm going to try to avoid watching TV. If you want to watch on your computer, you want to watch your TV shows, gesund hey, like enjoy.
So you don't believe that there's a fine line, say this to this person, he's extremely rigid, like no TV in the house, and if they get me somebody, if a shotgun sends me somebody who will actually watch TV every so often, the shidduch is off. You don't believe in that?
I don't believe in it as a general rule, but I wouldn't say I don't believe in it because I think that it depends where you're holding. If you're talking to a guy who's been learning in Kollel for, he's been learning in yeshiva for the past 5 years and he's super, super frum and TV is like, is something that he has zero shaykhs to whatsoever, right. or even if he used to and he's gotten so far beyond that, then why should he have to compromise on that? I feel like certain people have the right to be rigid and some people don't have the right. Like you're not holding there yourself, so don't be super rigid about it. If you're somebody who sometimes watches TV shows on online, then don't say that you're going to get married and then like that's it. We're going to go cold turkey, never ever watch a TV show again.
Right.
Say we won't have it in the house. We'll watch it online sometimes.
Right. We'll go to Bobby and Zadie.
We'll go on Bobby and Zadie. Exactly.
They got to be good for something.
Right.
Exactly.
Look, back in the day, it was Marvelous Meadows Machine. That was the only thing that was entertaining to watch. Instead of The Simpsons, I'd watch Marvelous Meadows Machine.
Dr. Meadows.
Exactly. That was back then. But Chani, what's your take on that?
So I would say, Yona, I wouldn't say necessarily that certain people don't deserve to ask that.
I was being extreme with that, but
okay.
Right, but I definitely agree that people should be self-aware. What I would say is also, sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to think long-term, like, what kind of effect is this going to have on my future? I get it. Obviously you're trying to build your future now, but it can be a little hard to know the specifics of how one little aspect of your life is going to play out. But I would say one thing that might be good to do is to really think like, what kind of impact does this have on my life now? Meaning my decision to watch or not watch TV. Why do I do or not do that? And what's it doing to my life? If somebody consciously chose not to have that as a part of their life because, they're a better person without it, they're a more productive person without it, they're a more spiritual person without it, I definitely think that's a very valid reason. And if it's just something that you've always done or not done but never really thought about why or why not, like really take that time to think. You'll learn so much about yourself.
Interesting.
And
it's funny, Chani, because like people in our community, they love to put other people in a specific box because we have so much Jewish anxiety and so much Jewish guilt that if they're not in that box and they go out with us and they're not in our circle, there's an issue.
Where like I grew up similar sort of, middle of the road,
Right.
leaning a little more right wing Heimish. And I used to have that a lot more, where it was like, I would sort of like think like, oh, young Israel, that's a whole different world. It's a whole, and I don't know, as I got older, the more exposure I had to things, I realized we're not as different as we think. Really not. Like, yeah, okay, the davening's a little different. I've come to like certain parts of that type of davening, actually. Like, for example, like the like Eitz Chaim before stuff. I love that. Like, I happen to absolutely love that, and I do that when I daven for the Amud. Like,
That's funny.
But I've come to realize that these things are so superficial. Some of it, like sometimes there are some real things where it's like real, serious differences in terms of your outlook, in terms of your hashkafic outlook. But like in terms of the way you daven, the way you pronounce the saf or the taf,
Yeah.
Does that really make a difference? And it's interesting. I was
Disclaimer: it wouldn't make a difference in my Shidduchim anymore. Like, I don't really think of it. Like, if somebody davens the young Israel, it's not a big deal. Like,
right, but I get that. I get that feeling. I
it's
also
just
used
there.
to have that. Like, I used to have that
You're an
same sort of,
imposter.
and it wasn't, the truth is, like, as I said, it wasn't something I was ever taught. I found my rebbeim to be very open-minded overall, even if they weren't young Israel type at all. But I found them to be very accepting and very open-minded, and I was never taught that. It wasn't like I don't want it to be like, oh, this is what happens when, like, I don't think this is something that came from my schooling. I think it's just sort of I think that people have a tendency to box themselves. People have a tendency to look at other groups and say, oh, this group is different. This group does things wrong. This group, like everything, our way is the right way. And I think it's a self-imposed thing. Sometimes it is a communal thing, but I think that that's because the community individually, everybody sort of self-imposes it, and then they reinforce it, and then their kids learn it. So I think that even if you're not taught it explicitly, if you're not exposed to it so much, it becomes weird.
Nobody talks Shidduchim. This is the Nobody Talks Shidduchim podcast.